Hi, family. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Be Wise movement. I am Loretta Simpson, your host. Let me start off by thanking you for sharing, subscribing, and liking our channel. We appreciate you tuning in to find out what we are discovering in the area of education. Today I want to talk to you about how to teach your children to survive in primary white institutions. I have been educated in all primary white institutions. Being educated has taught me the skills that I need to survive in a culture and a climate that's not accepting or tolerant of minorities or people that are different than this European culture and climate that we live in. From primary school up to my higher learning experience, all of my education has been in a primary institution. And every level, every step of the way, I have had to fight to show that I was worthy to be there. A lot of my time was spent trying to justify who I was as a person, trying to express my ability to be there, and then also trying to combat the discriminatory practices and language oftentimes that are associated with a Eurocentric curriculum or Eurocentric teachers. So I want to encourage you as parents. I know my struggles growing up, but I can also identify with my daughter's struggles. I can remember a time when she was in junior high school, and she was having some issues with a teacher, and she felt like the teacher was discriminating against her. Of course, I began to review the assignments that the teacher was assigning to her, and then I would go to the school and just observe through the window classroom activities. And so I decided to book an appointment with the school psychologist as well as the principal. And this is what I simply said to them, and I'm going to be nice when I say it to you. But of course, you have to read in between the lines. My language was not so clean when I presented it to the principal and the school psychologist. I essentially said, the same way you pick her up and receive her in school is the same way I want to receive her when she comes home. So if she's having issues or if she's not doing what you need her to do, as her responsible parent, you need to be in communication with me. My child is there to learn and to do the very, very best that she can. Your responsibility is to communicate with me as the adult. And I reminded them there will be no racism and discrimination toward my child. And I simply told the principal that I had the opportunity to observe the teacher. She was unaware of it, and she was rude and disrespectful. So I reminded them the same way I sent her to school is the same way I want her to come back home. So this was a lesson of family values and family practices. And I told my daughter, if administrators and teachers are not aware of your values, then they won't honor you as an individual. I taught her never to back down. If she stands on the principles and on the knowledge of what she is doing is correct and is not based on ideas, but it is factual, then she has the right to openly debate that conversation. And if the teacher openly disregards that, then as a parent, I have the right to go back to the school administrators to have this conversation. But I do want to say, being in that type of environment, it is difficult to focus and difficult to learn because you're always trying to prove who you are as an individual. You're trying to make the administrators and the teachers aware that you are worthy of a education that is just as diversified as any other student that they are teaching. But the problem is that there is no room in the United States education curriculum for African history or Afrocentric stories or narratives. You have one or two stories. You'll hear about Martin Luther King. You'll hear about Rosa Parks. You'll learn about Harriet Tubman. But you never really have conversations about Pan-Africanism, about slaves that fought during the transatlantic slave trade and refused to be a slave. Those are parts of history you don't hear. You don't learn that Christopher Columbus didn't actually discover America. It was a black man who was navigating and charting Christopher Columbus, but you never hear those stories. But at any rate, as a parent, you should be aware that your child sometimes will be challenged by teachers simply because they don't like them for the color of their skin. So as a parent, you need to make sure that you're reviewing their homework. You need to make sure that there's no biases or there's no discrimination within the homework assignment, because believe it or not, there are some assignments written into this curriculum that is offensive to children. And so if you find something that goes against your values or your practices or even your faith, you need to make sure you inform the teacher and then the administrator and ask for options. So you may have to complete it, but they need to understand the lens from which you're looking into it. I do believe as we move forward, the education curriculum will become more inclusive, and it just won't have a focus on a European history from a context. So I think the more you consider what your child needs, possibly consider moving them out of primary white institutions. Like I said, I've had to fight my entire life being educated because I was in primary white institutions. As a child through high school, I had no choice because it was based on where geographical location. So a lot of the times it was a big struggle. And for some strange reason, I ended up in all of my degrees in primary white institutions. But I tell you, I fought and I pushed back and I demanded respect. I demanded to be acknowledged as a woman, as a person of color, and then as an older woman when I started going into a second master's degree. So I was always pushing for equity and access throughout. And sometimes I would just simply buck the system because I know the history or the narrative they were spinning was not our narrative. So his story is really not our story, and we need to be able to rewrite history and tell our story ourselves. We don't need permission to tell our story, and we can be unapologetically approaching decisions and conversations. We can stand in ourselves and in the knowledge of our ancestors and our truth to try to encourage open-mindedness and learning. So I would ask that if you are in a primary white institution or your child is in a primary white institution, that you be familiar with what your teacher and the school's values and principles are. What you don't want is a child coming through primary school already growing through high school feeling inadequate, and by the time they're reaching higher learning level, just pure confused about who they are as an individual and who they are culturally. So There is a huge identity crisis among African Americans, but I am grateful there is a awakening that's happening across the land these days. So I want to encourage you to stand in your truth, know who you are as an individual, and if your child comes home and reports to you that they are uncomfortable, or if an administrator or a teacher or a worker said something to them and they got an uneasy feeling or thought it was inappropriate, that you should be open-minded and you should listen and try to compartmentalize what is happening in that setting. For some reason, I wish, honestly, that I would have attended an HBCU. And I tell you why. I have been pro-black all of my life. But I'm grateful that I was made strong to weather this type of storm. And I am hoping that in the process, many was able to hear me and then maybe reconsider their thoughts about integration and education curriculum, as well as access and inclusion. You hear a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion. We are not so much concerned about diversity and inclusion. We are more concerned about equity and access. So in order for your child to get what they need, you must have to first demand that the education system, the State Department of Education, consider the curriculum and the requirements, because certainly we are now discovering that the history we have been teaching for centuries is not the truth. So I always tell people, if you want to know the truth, ask me. If you want to know a lie, go ask somebody else. So in regards to primary white institutions, choosing to take that route is certainly a difficult route, but it will give you the strength and the tenacity to survive if you are a strong believer in black love, black power, black education, black advancement. Then you will have no problem standing up for who you are as a person. You will have no problem having strong debates about history and how things occurred. So you should be aware and make sure that you are making the right choices. The only thing that I miss out on is having the HBCU experience. I always get excited when I hear HBCU graduates talk and they've gone through the fraternity and the sorority process, and very proud. So I am a proud HBCU supporter, and I am a dreamer of having completed at least one degree through an HBCU. But I'm also grateful that of my experience, because it has allowed me to be the person that I am today. Love me, like me, or hate me. I am who I am, and I am grateful for it today. So I want to say, in the area of education, we have to change our mindset, and we should become our child's first teacher. Learning from home and learning from parents and the environment is the best education and experience a child can ever have. By the time that child reaches school, they'll be able to have an honest exchange with teachers as well as their peers. So you want to make sure that your child is being empowered, encouraged, and excited about learning. And if they are not, you need to be trying to figure out why they are not happy, or what the issues are at school. So being in a primary white institution, it is not easy at all. You need some big cojones to survive in a primary white institution. I can tell you it was overwhelming many a times, and the battles I had to fight going back and forth. I've had to go through Board of Trustees, write FOIA requests. I once served as the Diversity and Inclusion Council president, and that's when I learned that diversity and inclusion is a catchy phrase for white folks. They don't want to be diverse and included of all races. Diversity and inclusion has become, in this era, LGBTQ community. If you are in that community, then that's considered being diverse and inclusive. But we say equity and access. Let's change the narrative and create a shift when it comes to diversity and inclusion, because we know that as the Diversity and Inclusion Council president, what I found out is that they wanted to construct the story and write the narrative based on what they think diversity and inclusion truly is. All the while, those who were being excluded remained excluded. So we wanted to make sure that we had a voice and that we were being heard. And when you are not heard, you cannot accomplish much. But I would advise you or encourage you to be true to who you are. And just because you stand on the opposite side does not mean that you are in disagreement. But what you will get is a level of microaggression and subtle discrimination. Be aware of that. Learn the clues or cues of subtle discrimination, and don't be intimidated by it. Feel free to tackle it head on whenever you see it, and get to know your peers and your administrators and the leaders and the people that are around you. You have the right to be able to stand up for your beliefs, but you have to know how to frame it. Framing it is very important. So sometimes you have to go hard with it, and sometimes you have to approach it a different way. So there are many tools to surviving in a primary white institution. I say stay strong. Make sure that you have your psychosocial well-being is well connected, that you're eating good, that you're sleeping, that your stress is low, because all of these things can be triggered when you're under this type of pressure and this amount of stress. It is not easy surviving in a PWI, but you can survive in it. And I just want to say thank you for tuning in. As usual, please subscribe, share, and hit that notification button. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.